She looked me in the eye on our wedding morning and told me I was not the father, then vanished before the church bell finished ringing. 21 years later, a cardboard box landed on my porch with our daughter's face smiling up at me from an old disposable camera photograph and a letter in her handwriting that began with the words, "I lied to save your life." If you think you know where this is going, you don't. I didn't either, and I was there. Hey folks, it's Frank from After Her Lies. Before I start, I have to say this. 96% of you who watch these videos aren't subscribed. 96. That number sits in my stomach like a stone. If you hear something in this story that matters to you, hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell me what you think in the comments. It does help, and it keeps this old man honest. My name is Frank Ellison. I'm 68 years old, retired from 28 years climbing poles and untangling wire for the electric company out of Chillicothe, Ohio. I know my way around ice storms, blackout calls, and a thermos of burnt coffee that you pass from a gloved hand to another as Dawn tries to remember how to be blue again. I didn't always talk into a camera at a card table in my garage. I didn't always know what to do with the evenings. Back then, before all of this, I had a red Firebird with primer on one fender, a paycheck that smelled like creosote and metal shavings, and a woman named Claire Bennett who could stop a room just by walking into it. I met Claire at the Ross County Fair in the summer of 1980. I had just snagged the union job, and my brother Rudy told me I needed to celebrate by losing $20 to a ring toss and a prettier girl. He was wrong on the first count. I kept my money. But I lost my sense of time the second I saw Claire. That is the truth. She was working a booth for the hospital auxiliary, selling paper fans with the Mercy Dove on them. It was heat you could drink that night. She had her hair pulled up with a pencil, a small silver cross at her neck, and eyes that said she could smile without moving her mouth. I bought 2 fans. Had no one to fan but myself, but I was already thinking ahead. We did not come from the same side of the tracks. Her father, Albert Bennett, ran the feed mill in the town like he had invented the idea of both. Folks said he had a way of helping you that made you wish you'd never needed help. My old man fixed broken things in other people's garages until his back quit, and my mother had hands that never stopped moving even when she slept. I was not the kind of boy Albert Bennett would have chosen. It didn't matter to me at the time. We were young, and the river was always cooler at night, and we believed that counted for something. Claire wanted nursing school at Mount Carmel in Columbus. I wanted to keep her old Nova running and pay the rent on a place where we could cook on a stove that didn't tilt. We carved out a life in the leftover corners. We ate chili dogs sitting on the hood of my car outside the Dairy Queen. We went to VFW dances and tried to learn the two-step from old men who wore hats with pins and eyes that saw too much. I put the ring on her finger in the parking lot behind the bowling alley where we had our first fight. She laughed and cried and then said yes while someone's AM radio was spilling out. Kenny Rogers so loud, the light bulbs hummed with it. Our fight that night had been about a shift trade. I had taken an overnight to cover for a guy named Lester, whose wife had gone into labor. Claire said my work always came first, and that she might as well chain herself to a utility pole if she wanted me to show up. It was the kind of argument you only have when neither of you knows what you're really scared of yet. We made up the way you do. We wrote the future down on napkins, the wedding set for October, a church by the river with white mums and chicken salad sandwiches on little squares of Wonder Bread, because her mother liked things neat and manageable. The weeks before the wedding were a blur of errands I didn't understand and promises I meant. There were fittings for suits in a back room that smelled like cedar. There were meetings with a pastor who wanted to know how we planned to keep God in our house, besides on Sundays. There were calls from my foreman about a new stretch of rural line that kept dropping out whenever lightning looked at it sideways. I worked late more than once. Claire said her father was on her about the guest list, that he wanted to make sure the county commissioner had a good seat and that the man who'd once been lieutenant governor might stop by. I didn't really hear her. When you are 22, you think everything is a practice run until it isn't. 2 nights before the wedding, my buddy Tommy Greer and I sat on my back steps, splitting a 6-pack and swatting mosquitoes as big as thumb joints. Tommy was the one who taught me how to climb in my spikes without hugging the pole like a koala. He had a grin that never decided if it was sorry or not. He said he was going to sneak bells onto my bumper, and he wanted to know if we had a honeymoon plan beyond the Motel 6 by the interstate. I told him we were driving up to Lake Erie, that we'd see a lighthouse and eat perch and feel like people whose names meant something beyond whose shift they covered. He nodded, then got quiet, then said he needed to tell me something and didn't. I should have pressed. I didn't. I went to bed thinking about the way Claire's neck curved when she turned away in the mirror to pin her hair, thinking about the thin white line down her knee from when she fell off her bike at 7, thinking about 100 small things you never think are going to be wings, lifting you up or cutting your face when they spin too hard. The morning of our wedding, I woke before my alarm. The sky was the kind of clean blue you don't realize you miss until you see it again. I shaved slow. I thought about words like forever and for better and told myself I could learn how to hold those without squeezing them to death. At 9:30, my mother came by with a garment bag and a Tupperware full of deviled eggs because she could not show up anywhere without food. She fussed my collar, told me to breathe, told me she liked Claire and that she had never thought she would say that about anyone, because in her mind, no one could be good enough for a boy who used to bring her dandelion bouquets and call them sunflowers. At 10, Tommy pulled up and honked, which annoyed my mother, and I said goodbye and got into his truck. We drove toward St. Luke's. I can still see the way the light came through the truck windshield in bands. I can hear the rattle in the dashboard. I can taste the peppermint he handed me at the last light like it could sweeten me into a man who deserved what he was about to get. When we turned onto the church road, a woman stepped into the lane and waved us down. It was Claire's best friend, Emily Ward, in a dress too pale for her skin and eyes too dark for mourning. She looked like someone had told her a joke she could not find the laughter for yet. She walked up to my window and told me to roll it down. She said Claire was not coming. She said Claire had called her at 7. Crying, said she couldn't do it, said she wasn't ready, said she had made a mistake, said I was not the father, and that I needed to go home and not make a scene. You live a whole life in one sentence when it starts with, she said. The air went thin. There was a roaring in my ears that I know now is what happens to a man when all the electricity inside him tries to find ground at once. I asked where Claire was. Emily said she didn't know. The pastor came out then, looking like he wished someone would give him a mop big enough to clean up what was spilling. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Sometimes the Lord closes a door to point us to a better one." Tommy gripped the steering wheel so hard the knuckles went colorless, then said my name in a way that made me want to open the door and walk into traffic just to get away from it. I did not make a scene. I drove home, sat on my bed in a room that suddenly felt like a stranger's, and listened to my mother cry in the kitchen while she wrapped sandwiches that would not be eaten, while she called people from little slips of paper, while she took the mums apart and made them into something we could pretend to give to someone else. The day became a list of things not to do. Do not call her. Do not go to her house where her father will be on the porch, with a look that turns a man out of himself like a pocket. Do not drink until you cannot stand. Do not lie down, and do not stand up. I called Claire once anyway. The phone rang twice, and then there she was. Her voice was small and hard at the same time, like a bead you could swallow by accident. She said she was sorry. She said she had been confused. She said the baby was not mine. I did not remember dropping the phone, but someone had put it on the cradle when I came back to myself, and my mother was holding the side of my face and telling me there was a pie cooling on the counter, and that sometimes the world was a terrible cook. For a long time after that, I let work be the thing that held up the tent. Night calls kept me from thinking. I took overtime until I fell asleep in my boots. Tommy kept showing up, silent as a fence post, dropping off catalogs and tools he said he didn't like anyway. I stopped going to the places where Claire and I had been young, because ghosts are greedy in the first year, and this ghost could eat a county. People told me what she did. They said they saw her at Kroger with her mother, thinner, hair cut short. They said she looked like she'd won a race that no one had been sure she had entered. They said the Bennetts were sending her to her aunt's in Clearwater to get some sun and let the whole unpleasantness blow over. Someone said they heard she married a banker. Someone said she lost the baby. People will tell you stories because silence scares them more than lies do. That is one of the things I know now, and did not then. I moved out of town for a while. Cincinnati first, on a crew that did downtown work that made you feel small as a nail. Then Toledo, then back home when my mother got sick and needed someone to open jars and carry laundry down the steps and argue with the insurance forms. I dated other people, if you can call it dating, when you never learn how to tell the truth about yourself. I went to a ball game in Cleveland with a woman named Diane, who wore lipstick that tasted like cherry cough syrup and talked about her ex-husband for 9 innings like she was paying by the word. I had a quiet 6 years with a teacher named Jan, who wanted to live in a house that smelled like lemon oil and forgiveness. I never could get to the second smell, so we parted the way people do when they get tired of being careful. Here is where you think the story will skip ahead to the box on the porch. It will. But first, I have to tell you about the last time I saw Tommy before the box arrived, because his part is the bone in this stew. We were sitting on the tailgate outside a job south of Kingston, the kind of day that starts with frost and ends with shirt sleeves. Tommy had jerky in a bag and half a smile. He asked if I ever thought about leaving Ohio. I said Ohio was stuck to my boots, and he said that was the problem. He asked if I still dreamed about Claire. I said I dreamed about a lot of things I couldn't fix. He put the jerky down, stared off at the tree line, and told me he had to say something. He told me that on my wedding morning, while I was putting on my tie, he was at the Bennett's house. He said Albert had called him the night before, told him to come by for a word like they were old friends. He said Albert had stood him in his wood-paneled front room and told him in a voice that you don't put your back to that Claire was not going to marry me, that he and his wife were putting her on a bus to her aunt, that there was money in it for Tommy if he helped keep me from making a mess of the day, and that there would be trouble for anyone who put his hands where the Bennets had already put theirs. Tommy said he took the money and the job of stopping me because he was 2 months behind on his truck, and his mother's house was being swallowed by a second mortgage. He said he was not proud, and he said he knew I would never forgive him, and he said he wanted me to slug him because a bruise might be better than the ache that had rotted in him. I did not hit him. I did not say anything at all. I stood up from that tailgate and I walked to the truck and I drove away. I did not speak to him again, not for years. I had a talent then for leaving people where I found out the bad thing about them. I have paid for that talent more than once. Then the box. It was a Sunday in May, 2 decades and change after the church day. I was washing my coffee cup at the sink when I heard a thud on the porch that sounded like delivery men make when they don't care about the thing they are delivering. I opened the door, and there it was. A banker's box with a strip of green tape across the top, and my name written in a hand I recognized in my bones. My heart did a trick that hurts even when you're not afraid of dying anymore. I carried it inside like it might explode. I set it on the table and looked at it for a full minute, the way a man looks at a faithful dog he knows is about to bite him for the first time. Inside, under a layer of newspaper that made me want to check the date, were letters. Dozens. The top one had my name written on it, then the address of my apartment from that first year after the non-wedding, then a postmark from Clearwater, Florida, from the 2nd week of November of that year. I opened it carefully. The paper had the weight you only get from someone who spends their days around medical charts. It was Claire's handwriting, the contained cursive that always looked like she was trying to keep her words from slipping out of their lines. Frank, I am at Aunt B's. That is what Mother calls her. She calls her that because she cannot say Beatrice like it belongs to a person. I hope this letter finds you before the world gets any harder than it already is. I do not expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know that the baby is yours. I said what I said because Father is a man who does not know how to lose. He told me things that made me understand losing can be contagious. I am trying to do the thing that saves the most. I hate that I cannot find a way to save everything. I sat there with that letter in my hands, head bowed like someone praying, though I've never been good at that. I read it twice, then lifted the next envelope, and then the next. The dates ran all through November and December, then thinned out into the new year. She wrote about a boarding house near the water with a woman who smelled like baby powder and cigarettes, who made toast by burning it on purpose and scraping off the black. She wrote about the baby kicking while she sat on a bench looking at pelicans that looked like hunched old men. She wrote about being scared of what her body was doing and more scared of what her father would do when she came home. She wrote my name in ways that made those letters a place to live in for a while. The last letter was from March. That one had a photograph paper clipped to it. In the photo, there was a baby with hair so black it looked painted on, asleep, mouth slightly open, like he'd just let go of a song. The letter said, "Our daughter is named Joy, because I have to call her something no one can take." It said a couple from Tampa had been chosen by an agency before the baby was born. It said, "You should know that if the world were kinder, I would have placed her in your arms and told the truth without looking over my shoulder." It said I am sorry in a way, that makes sorry look smaller than it really is. At the bottom of the box, there was another envelope, bigger. It was addressed to me in the same hand, but this time the date on the postmark was something like a punch. 2 months ago, from a town in Indiana. Inside was a letter that started with, "I am sick." It said the kind of sick that puts careful in front of everything until everything runs out. It said, if this letter reaches you, I need you to know that I tried 1,000 doors, but none of them opened the way we wanted. It said her husband, a good man named Greg, who taught shop at a high school and fixed anything that plugged in, would make sure I got the box if she could not come herself, and that he had never known a day that did not make her grateful after the madness of her father's house. It said Joy had found her a few years back through one of those websites, that they had been building a bridge with ropes and knots and laughter. It said Joy had a daughter named Piper who thought Claire's hands smelled like flour and peppermint. Her husband did deliver the box. 2 days later, he was a big man with careful eyes. He stood on my porch holding his hat like it was evidence. He said Claire wanted you to know that lies came easy to the men who taught her, but that she still believed in telling the truth even when it couldn't fix anything. He said she had died the previous week in a hospice room that faced west, and that the last thing she did with her good breath was say my name and our daughter's. I have been hit by a live wire before. You learn how to let go while your muscles are certain they want to hold on. Grief is the same. It breathes you like a harmonica. I thanked him. We sat at my table. I made coffee that was not as good as the occasion demanded. We told Claire stories for an hour. He did not look threatened by me. Humans are better than we think, and worse than we hope, sometimes both at once. He asked if I wanted to meet Joy. He had her number. He said she lived outside of Indianapolis with her husband, a man named Mark, who sold farm equipment and played church softball hard enough to twist his ankle every other season. He said they had a girl, Piper, who was 8 and liked to build things out of cardboard that did not exist in any catalog. He said Joy knew my name. He said she had known it for a long time. I told him I needed a day. Then I called. The phone rang, and I braced myself for that voice. And then there it was, a woman-shaped version of the time between the last good thing and the next one. She said hello with the question mark baked in, like she was asking the world to be the one she wanted. I said Joy, and my voice failed me for a second. Broke like a cheap zipper on a coat you should have thrown out last winter. I told her who I was. She said I know. She said I have waited a very long time to hear you call me that. We cried, both of us. The way you cry when you have to shed something to make room for something else. We met the next weekend at a diner off I-70 that has a giant fiberglass chicken out front and pancakes that come on plates roughly the size of manhole covers. I brought flowers because I did not know what else to bring. She brought a box of photographs in a bag that used to hold soccer cleats. Piper drew me at the table with a green crayon because she'd run out of other colors. In her picture, I had hair. I thanked her for the gift, and she told me I should get a dog. Joy had my eyes. That was the most obvious thing, but it was not the thing that knocked me sideways. What did that was the tilt of her head when she listened. It was Claire's tilt. The same angle, the same way of taking in a thing like music and sorrow at once. She told me about her childhood with the couple from Tampa, Jack and Marie, who had been kind and frightened in equal measure. She told me about the day she found Claire through a site that matches DNA, like the library matches books to missing shelves. She told me about writing to Claire the first time, and about their first meeting in a park where Claire brought lemon cookies and 2 mismatched cups and a thermos, and about how they both kept touching each other's hands like they were making sure they were real. She told me Claire had said she had to write to me, that she had tried, that her letters had been sent back once, then held by someone, as if time itself had thumbed the address and said, "Maybe later." I asked the question I had been avoiding while breathing. Why did she say I was not the father? Joy took a long drink of water and looked at me the way a person looks at a bird on a branch, like any movement could ruin something fragile. She said because her father had taken Tommy's debt in his fist and used it like a hammer. She said Albert had told Claire he had photographs. She said he had followed me for a week with a man who knew how to make a file thick. He had found where my brother bought his weed and the one time I had swung at a man in a bar and connected. He had made a nuisance look like a rap sheet. He told Claire he would show all of it to a judge and say I was a danger and get the kind of orders signed that put bodies between babies and fathers. He had told her he would make it not just hard, but illegal for her to let me near the child. He had told her he would ruin my mother by calling a code inspector on our house while she was sick. He had told her a man in Columbus owed him a favor and that favors were currency he had never run out of. So she lied. She called me on that morning and said the words that would make a decent man back away before he hurt anyone worse. She picked the words that would wound me in a way that would be proof of her choice, because humiliation makes a person into a quiet room. She boarded a bus with her mother. She wrote me from a safe distance. She hoped she could keep the letters ahead of her father's appetite for control. And somehow, someway, most of those letters came back or got kept, until the day they didn't. It took me a long time to breathe properly after that. The waitress came by and slid a piece of pie onto the table without asking. She said it looked like we needed sugar. Piper asked me if I could fix a toaster. I told her I could fix almost anything if I could stare at it long enough. Even a heart. But that took more time and more parts. Joy asked if I wanted to be in her life. I told her yes, and I told her I didn't know how, and she said we could figure out a way that wouldn't scare anybody. She said I could come to her softball game the next week and sit with the grandparents and pretend to be someone's cousin if I needed to ease in. I told her I had done harder things than walking to a fence and knowing who to root for, but that I appreciated the thought. We agreed on calls, on slow, on owning the discomfort when it showed up, and not pretending confusion was anyone's fault. I drove home that day and pulled over twice, once to throw up by a soybean field, and once to let out a sound I wouldn't have wanted my worst enemy to hear. People talk about closure like it is a door you get to shut. I think closure is a room with windows you have to keep opening because someone built the place without vents. I went to the softball game. I sat near the dugout and learned the rhythm of watching someone who looks like you from the side. I met Joy's husband, Mark, who shook my hand as if he could feel the tremor in my bones, who said he was glad to have another person to carry coolers to the car. I met Jack and Marie. They were gray and soft and kind. Marie told me I had Claire's way of saying the word sorry like it could be used to oil a hinge. I started to know the shape of my daughter's laugh. I learned that she hates mushrooms and will eat green beans straight from the cannon when she is stressed, that she plays the radio too loud when she drives, and that when she is mad, she cleans the refrigerator shelves with a toothbrush. I learned that she looks away from the camera when she is happy. I learned that she can draw as if her pencil has a secret. We walked into all that as if stepping into a river. You know we'll be cold forever. Your legs get used to it. Your heart remembers something it had not found the words for. I also called Tommy. I did not owe him that, but I owed myself the experience of looking at a man I had cut from my life and seeing if he still had the shape of the friend I had liked. He picked up on the second ring and said my name, like he was leaning on a fence he had not trusted for a long time. He told me he had 12 apologies, and none of them were made of the right stuff. I told him about the box. He went quiet, and then he cussed at the sky, and then he told me something I had not known. He told me that Emily Ward, the friend who had stopped my truck that morning, had not just been following instructions. He said Emily had been in love with Claire so long, it had become a foundation she built everything on. He said she had tried to talk Claire out of me because she thought love should not hurt the way Claire's did under her father's roof. He said Emily had delivered a letter to my apartment the week after the wedding, a letter Claire had given her at the bus station, and that letter had been taken out of my mailbox by someone who knew how to use a key that wasn't theirs. Here is the complicated thing. The person who took that letter, according to Tommy, was my father. My own father, trying to save his son from a world of hurt he figured had already taken more than it should. Tommy said he had seen my father do it, had sat in his truck and watched from the curb like a sinner who didn't want to call the preacher a liar. He said my father had stood by the mailbox with his face folded into the look men get when they decide to build a wall out of good intentions and lay themselves down as the first brick. I did not want to believe it. My father had been a quiet man whose sadness came out in the way he wiped the table as if it had a memory he could clear. But I had seen that sadness keep secrets. When my brother Rudy wrecked the Buick, Dad had told the cop Rudy had been home playing cards. When my uncle fell off the wagon, Dad had put the bottles in the trash without comment and sat on the porch between him and the world until the shaking stopped. He believed in sparing people the things he did not think they could bear. He believed that the worst thing a man could do was hand someone he loved a bag of stones and pretend it was bread. My father was gone by the time I learned this. He had died on a Tuesday, the kind of day you forget if you don't put a nail in it. I drove to the cemetery anyway, because a man sometimes needs to talk to the person who gave him his hands. I stood by his stone and told him what I had been told. I told him I would have rather had the stones than all the years without the taste of bread. I forgave him aloud because I needed to hear it the same way you need to hear a door latch when you leave a house in a hurry. Forgiveness is a sound sometimes, not a feeling. A month later, another twist. You think a heart can take only so many, but it is a muscle, and muscle grows around the tear. Joy called me on a Wednesday morning while I was trying to fix the latch on my garage. She said she had done one of those DNA kits years back, the kind that come in a little box and ask you to spit and promise to tell you why you like cilantro or hate mornings. She had never looked beyond finding Claire. She had not searched my side because she did not want to push. She said she had opened the app on her phone that day, and there was a new match blinking at her like a porch light. It said, close family. It said, first cousin or uncle. The name was Rudy Ellison. I laughed, then I sat down on the oil-stained concrete. I told her Rudy was my brother, that he had moved to Kentucky to get married, and then moved back when he realized he liked the horse track more than his wife. I told her she had an uncle she hadn't met who could cook chili that would make you late for anything and drink beer that would make you early. We called Rudy together that night. He cried, big and messy, the way the Ellisons do. He said he had a worn-out guitar and a couch that nobody could get out of once they sat down, and that now he had a niece, and a great niece, and a reason to clean. It kept arriving, the unexpected good stacked up like cordwood, next to the unexpected bad. Emily Ward sent me a letter. It was 3 pages of neat script that apologized in a way that made me want to put my hand on her shoulder and tell her young people do the best they can with maps they draw themselves. She said she had loved Claire, not in a way that had a chance, but in a way that had shaped her wanting for the rest of her life. She said she had thought of me as the boy who would set a match to Claire's house, because that is what fathers like Albert teach you about men with grease under their nails. She said she had been wrong, and that being wrong had been the most expensive thing she ever bought, without meaning to. I wrote her back. I told her there were days when I had been the boy with the match. I told her I had not lit it. I told her I hoped she found a way to stand in the doorway of her own life and not keep one foot on the porch where it felt safer. She wrote again, this time saying she had finally left the job at the bank where she had been an assistant to people who never learned her name. She had started teaching art to kids who think their drawings are not worth putting on the fridge, and that she was good at it. I liked that. I went to Clearwater once to stand on the spot Claire might have sat. There is a bench by the water with a plaque for someone named Alice who loved birds. I sat there and watched a pelican preen like a man fixing his tie in a mirror that hadn't been cleaned since last Sunday. I said her name. I said it again. A woman next to me asked if I was looking for someone, and I told her yes, and she told me people come here for that. The sun went down in layers, a cake you would ruin if you tried to cut it too soon. I called Joy and told her it was almost like being in a photograph, and she said that made sense, because photographs are the only places we keep time from doing what it does. You want to know how it ends. People ask that like we can put the last period on something as tall as a life. I will tell you this. The truth did not give me back my 20s. It did not put Claire in a white dress at the top of a church aisle. It did not put my hand on her stomach that winter as our daughter turned herself into a person. It did not change the way my mother died, not knowing she had a granddaughter with her eyes. It did not fix Tommy's debt or make my father into a man who trusted pain to teach without a chaperone. The truth did something else. It drew a path through the hurt that did not end in a swamp. It gave me a daughter who calls me when her washing machine makes a noise like a coin rolling inside a throat. It gave me a granddaughter who leaves sticky handprints on my kitchen table and says she will invent a machine that makes the smell of popcorn come out of photographs. It gave me holidays where I sit at a table with people who know where the forks are without asking. It gave me a reason to show up anywhere on time and to stay until the chairs go up on the tables. Last winter, Joy asked if I wanted to visit Claire's grave with her. She had found the cemetery near the little town in Indiana where Claire had lived with her husband. We drove there on a Saturday. The ground was hard, and the air had that clean bite that wakes up any sadness that was getting lazy. The stone was simple, a name and 2 dates and a line of music notes that only someone who loved her would have chosen. Joy put a hand on the top of the stone and said, "Hi, Mom," like you do when you walk into a room you pay rent on. I put my hand on the edge and said, Thank you for the lie and the letters." Joy laughed and cried at the same time, and told me it was the most Ellison thing I could have said. We stood there and let the wind speak its useless language. We told her about Piper's science fair, and about the way Joy had sung in the car the other night when the oldie station had played something from the year Claire turned 17. We told her about Mark's new job, and the way the house felt too quiet when the dishwasher ran by itself. We told her about Rudy's knees and about a pie that had gone wrong in a way that still tasted fine. Then we went and ate grilled cheese at a diner where the waitress called me Hon, like I had been coming in for years. On the drive back, Joy fell asleep in the passenger seat with her mouth open, just like in that baby photograph. I drove careful. I wanted to arrive with everything still inside our bodies. Do I wish I had done things differently? Every day. I wish I had driven to the Bennett's house and knocked on the door and let whatever happened happen in front of witnesses. I wish I had held onto my courage like a man holds a rope in high water. I wish I had found a way to be the kind of partner who could hear a woman's fear and not confuse it with an insult. I wish I had been brave enough to tell Jan I loved Claire the way a bird loves sky, and then to ask her to stay anyway, and to respect her answer when it came. I wish I had looked Tommy in the eye that day by the tailgate and said, "I forgive you," because I did. I just didn't know how to say it. I wish I had told my father I could carry more than he thought. I wish I had not handed a whole decade to anger like it was a landlord, and I owed back rent. But if you're waiting for me to say I wish Claire had not lied, I can't. It bends my tongue to admit it, and I do. But I cannot wish away the thing that gave me joy, and Piper, and a way to keep talking to the world from a garage with a camera. Sometimes the lie is the only tool the truth lets a person carry. I am not saying that makes it right. I am saying the world is the kind of machine that breaks our best intentions and still moves. Tommy and I, we mended. He had a heart attack 2 years ago. Not the kind that knocks you down in a grocery aisle. The kind that whispers and leaves you digging in your chest the way you do when a splinter is deep. I sat with him in the hospital while a young doctor explained the way blood forgets its job sometimes. Tommy told me he had gotten married to a woman named Leanne who worked at the license bureau and knew how to talk to men who were mad about numbers on a card. He said he'd told her everything about me and Claire before they got serious, because he did not want any floors in his house that sounded hollow. I told him the only thing I needed from him was to keep sitting down in chairs and standing up slow. He laughed, and then made a face like he had swallowed something he hadn't decided about yet. We play cards on Fridays. We tell the same stories. We give them the dignity of extra detail, the way old men do when they are trying to make sure the new ones learn where the nail heads are. I still go by St. Luke's sometimes. It is a different church now. People's names change around buildings the way ivy does. I park across the street and roll the window down and listen for a bell that is long gone. I do not do this to punish myself. I do it because places hold temperature in them, and I want to remind myself that you can step into a cool patch even on a very hot day if you know where to go. I started this channel because Joy told me I tell stories like I am fixing something while I talk. She said it might help other people who are trying to figure out how to stand up after someone's words knock their knees. She said YouTube was where people went when they wanted to feel less alone at midnight. She named it after her lies because she said that is the country we live in. You and me and everybody who has ever had to decide whether to believe the thing that hurts or the thing that doesn't. I argued with her about that title. I wanted something softer, like Blue Light Stories, because I am a sentimental man beneath the rust. She was right. She usually is. So here it is, the part where I look into this little black glass circle and ask you to help an old man keep telling it plain. If you made it this far, you already know I'm not trimming this to make it pretty. 96% of you watch and don't subscribe. That number makes me sad in a way I can measure when I look at this channel's little charts. If my story gave you something to hold for a minute, hit that subscribe button. Like this video so it lives a little longer in the wild. Tell me in the comments about your Claire, or your father, or your Tommy, or your Joy, or the way you forgave someone who thought they were saving you while they were hurting you. I read what you write. It lands in me. I will keep showing up here on Tuesday nights with the garage door down and the cicadas working the air like a zipper. This is Frank, and that was the truth I could carry tonight.